Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar this morning on progressive web apps. And hopefully, I'm not a non-technical guy. I'm Andy Pratt from Portio, and I've been helping people implement digital solutions for the last 20 odd years. And Portio provides apps and websites and digital solutions into the market for B2B and B2C organizations. And one of the things I'm often asked when I speak to people is really about the difference between a mobile app and a mobile website, and what we would tend to recommend given the choice of the two. And there's a lot of confusion often when in the marketplace, and depending on who you talk to can give different opinions. Obviously, people who specialize in apps may steer in one direction, people specialize in websites may steer you in a different direction. So in the next 10-15 minutes, what I'd like to do is just take the opportunity to talk about the difference between the apps and websites, and some of the new technology that's come along in the form of progressive web apps, or PWA, which is really kind of changing the landscape, we believe. So I hope to keep this fairly simple and avoid too much technology. A little bit of housekeeping. If you wouldn't mind sort of keeping on mute at the moment with the amount of people joined today, you can ask questions. If you go down to the bottom of the screen and hover, you should have a dialog box like is shown on the screen with a Q&A button on there. So if you want to ask any questions, please feel free at any time to go in and type them. And at the end, we'll try and answer as many as we can. For those where we don't get around to, we'll certainly come back to you after the webinar. So what I'd like to start is really the importance of mobile. I think it's fairly common knowledge on how widespread mobile use is. It's a prevalent way of accessing the website, well over 50%. And there's various stats to illustrate this. Look at the bar chart on the slide, for example. This is just showing the growth in the use of mobile in terms of e-commerce over the last few years, and the projection is going upwards. I think one of the interesting things, if we take maybe 2020 as an example, over 74% of the total value is done through mobile in terms of e-commerce compared to other channels. So it's very important channel. So it's kind of telling us what we probably already know, and the importance of having something that supports these users and meeting their particular needs. So there's really two ways of supporting mobile users, and what I'd like to just talk about how those have evolved and where we are as of today, really. So if we go back in time, so if we go back to the early 2000s when e-commerce really kind of started getting a grip, people were using desktop devices, and e-commerce sites were really written and produced around that. So this is in the time before smartphones came on the scene. So just people going in through through desktops. When smartphones arrived, people started recognizing the opportunity and developing mobile apps that could be deployed on the devices so that people could interact with the businesses. So shopping, entertainment, media, and so on and so forth. And that's really developed over the years. So we're now presented with one option, which is the very well developed and mature mobile app market. So mobile apps are something you would download from a app store. They deploy on the device, and the user interacts on the device just like any app on the phone. There's a separate development stream to that. People within the web world started to adapt their websites to support mobile. So websites that could be accessed through a mobile browser and give a more optimized experience for the user. So these have become as known as responsive websites. So a website which works on both a desktop, a tablet, or a mobile phone. When it works on a mobile phone, for example, the screen optimizes for the device. It can designed to be used with the hardware and those kind of things. So it's really come on some way. So today we can use an app, or we can use a responsive website to interact with a supplier or whatever. These can be known as different things. Mobile apps can be just called mobile apps, mobile applications. Mobile websites can often be called a web app. So a little bit of terminology here. I'm going to use mobile app for the app and responsive website for the websites. So there are differences in what these offer, and I just wanted to cover these off to sort of set the scene really. So first off, look at the app. One of the important things is it gives an offline capability. So should there be no communications or no mobile signal or whatever, then the app would still operate. However, when you think about if you wanted to transmit an order, clearly certain functionality is not available given that kind of circumstance. Apps also have a facility to provide what we call push notifications. So these are messages that the customer or the user would receive through the app onto the home screen of the phone, advising them of whatever the a company wanted to advise them of. They were also better integrated into the actual physical device, so they could use make better use of the camera and the GPS and all sorts of clever things on the phones. And finally, the app would download as an icon on the home screen, so your logo would always be there in front of the customer, and they could easily find it and visit your site. On the responsive website side, this offers some other benefits over mobile apps. So first of all, it's available just directly from a URL, a web address. So the user doesn't need to visit an app store to download the app. They could just go to direct from your website or from an email link or something like that. So a lot more convenient. And it doesn't download onto the device, so it doesn't need any memory on the device. I know that as the number of apps has grown, people try and cram more and more on their phones, things start filling up and that becomes a bit of a problem. Responsive websites also give greater exposure. So this works just like using web technology. It's open, it's exposed to things like search engine optimization and Google and things like that, where a mobile app is more in its own bubble and you don't get that kind of exposure. And finally, it's a single platform. So you could have a responsive website which would support your customers accessing it through a desktop, a tablet or a phone without having to maintain two different platforms, an app platform and a web platform, or having to kind of keep the data maintained and up to date on both those platforms. So that's where we are, or where we are before PWA came along. So let's talk a little bit about PWA, or progressive web apps are. So PWA really starts to move responsive websites forward and bridge the gap between the functionality on the app and functionality available through the website. So what's it do? Well, it introduces some new functionality. So, for example, the PWA devices can work offline. So when it's offline, data can be stored locally on the phone, so that connectivity isn't required all the time. It's device and form factor dependent, so still working on tablets, devices, whether it's an Apple phone or a Google phone or whatever, still works without any kind of specific customization. Home screen icons can be downloaded, so it would install and look like an app, even though it's not taking up the space on the phone. It can be made available in app stores. So if a user wants to go and access it through that kind of channel, they can do. And it offers an app-like interaction. So things like not running in a browser would run in its own window, so that it looks like a proper app. So it really does bridge the gap between. So look at some examples of how this works. On the left-hand side, we can see a website which I've visited on my phone. These are some screenshots I took from my phone a couple of days ago. And we can see that the first thing it's doing is inviting me to actually install the app onto the desktop. onto the home screen of the phone. So the second screenshot shows the early access icon that we've set up as an app on the home screen. If we then go in, we're presented with an experience which just looks like an app, really, although this is a PWA web app. So it's not running a browser, it's using the full screen, and it's also accessing all the hardware on the device. And then finally, as we can see, it's also inviting us to be able to send push notifications. So we can enable that and get push notifications just like a normal app. So if we go back and compare this with our original kind of comparison, we can really see that if we move across, we've really bridged the gap, and all the benefits that mobile apps provide over the responsive websites have been really incorporated into the PWA website. So we think this makes this a even more compelling case that responsive websites and PWA are really the best solution for supporting mobile users. That's kind of summarized by a nice little quote from Google about progressive web apps that are combining the best of both worlds, really. So just to really summarize this, in terms of actual business benefit, there's two big areas really we see. First of all, single systems. It offers single systems to support all your digital channels from desktop, tablets, and mobile phones. So this greatly reduces complexity. It obviously stops the need to invest in an app platform and a web platform. And even more importantly, it removes that duplication. So where we're changing things in terms of the design of our digital presence, or updating information, or changing functionality we want to put through the digital channels, we're only having to do that in one place. So if we change some content, we can change it in one place, and then anybody who accesses that from mobile or wherever will actually see that information. And then from a customer point of view, it's much more simpler. So we don't need to visit an app store. We can just download it from our website. We're not being presented with lots and lots of apps that we need to install on our device. We find that app adoption can be fairly limited through that, so it takes away a barrier. It also reduces the number of apps being deinstalled, so just keeps that presence on the screen. So I hope that's been useful. That was a very brief review. I hope I've tried to explain the pros and cons. My details are on the screen. If you've got any questions or you'd like to discuss anything, I'd be delighted to hear from you. What I'll now do is I'll just see whether we've got any questions, and then we'll try and use the last couple of minutes just to respond to as many as we can. So let me just have a look. I have a couple of questions here. The first one is, will PWA replace apps? So we believe that for the majority, this will be the case, really. And this is a view we do get from speaking to many other people in the market and the analysts and developers out there. PWA has been around for since 2015, so it's still a relatively new technology, but being very well adopted by a lot of major brands in the industry. There have been some barriers in terms of the operating systems that were compatible. These are now coming down. So iOS have now moved their position slightly, so that it's much better support for PWA on Apple devices. So, we'd question really, unless there's a real big driver for an app, then why would you invest in the two, really? So another question here. I hear apps account for the largest use of mobile. Is this still the case? Yeah. So when we look at the statistics on this, we can see, or the analysts sort of measure that about 80% of use of a mobile devices through apps, but sorry, 80% of the use of mobile device of apps is on things like games, social and entertainment. So a relatively small percentage of that is in other things like e-commerce. So the story is very different. I think if you're streaming a streaming service or whatever, then apps still have a place, but I think that is moving to some degree as well. And another question just come in. Are there any examples of PWA sites I can look at? Yeah, there are plenty around. What I'll do is, if anybody is interested in that, I think the best thing to do is if you drop me a mail at andy.pratt@portio.co.uk. I can send you a few links so you can go and have a look and have a play yourself. So that's the last of the questions. I hope you found it useful. Be delighted to hear from you, and have a very good rest of your day.